This is an iconic Aussie Chelsea work boot, but so is this. Let's go look at the similarities and differences and which ones that you might prefer. How you going? Welcome back to Bootlosophy. My name is Tech. I acknowledge the region that I work and live on as Wajak Noongar Boodja. What I want to do in this video is to compare a couple of Aussie handmade brands, I guess to dive into their differences and similarities, and also to be truthful, I wanted to celebrate a couple of made in Australia brands. Now, my regular viewers will know that I'm not xenophobic about brand manufacturing, nor do I unrealistically think that we can return to mass manufacturing in any highly developed economy. Being economically trained, I know that globalism is hard to retreat from, not because we should chase the cheapest manufacturing source, but mainly because highly developed economies no longer have workers who want to do developing world or early developed world trades. Our populations are becoming more and more educated and technologically based, and fewer people want to work in factories or in trades they feel are now beneath them. No matter how low or high unemployment is in any highly developed economy, people want jobs in offices, technology, avoiding mind-numbing repetitive tasks, wanting to use their heads more than their hands. Witness how hard it is for any old heritage boot brand to find apprentice bootmakers. Witness how many immigrants or tourist backpackers work in farming, catering and hospitality. Nor do I believe that manufacturing in any one country is better than another. Edward Deeming saw the end of poor quality manufacturing in so-called cheap countries, and business schools thereafter have hastened the end of it. No, quality is not dependent on geography, but is born of good processes and procedures and quality control systems. Systems and procedures that any country can install into manufacturing, if that is what their contracting brands want produced. Blame the specs demanded by brands manufacturing overseas, not the countries that they manufacture in. So, for this comparison, I wanted to focus on what these two brands, R.M. Williams and Wootten, do and produce. Let's start with the boots. This is the R.M. Williams Goodwood Chelsea boot. For whatever marketing or production design, this is now known as the new Gardener boot. This other boot is the Smith work boot from small brand Wootten. RM used to have a Gardener before, only it used to be a slimmer round toe last, similar to their older turnout models. They used to produce it in kip leather in black, brown and tan, and was actually worn by Aussies working in landscaping and gardening when they used to cost under 300 Aussie dollars. The Goodwood, now Gardener, is built on a rounder, more traditional Aussie work boot last. And that's why I chose it to compare against the Wootten, because it's closer in its design. RM's more famous and popular Chelsea boot is the Craftsman, with a much slimmer last ending in a pointy chisel toe. But that is generally considered, once upon a time, more of a riding boot on sheep and cattle stations. But since the price has shot up in the last 10 years or so, it's now seen more in boardrooms and offices. I'm comparing the Goodwood against the Wootten, which is called the Smith work boot, and is intentionally designed to be a better built, more upmarket version of Australian paddock boots and farming boots like the Blundstone and the Redback. The Goodwood is in RM's Crazy Horse leather in the original colour that they called bark. It's a supple, oiled nubuck that feels comfortable around the foot and patinas really well as well, as you can see. The Smith is in a cognac-coloured bovine raffa, also very soft and supple, and it's burnished by the maker at the toe and the heel. So these are the boots I'll compare, but we should start with the brands. But before I do, can I just remind you to click on like and subscribe? It will really help the Bootlosophy channel grow viewers, which will help me. And it should actually help you also if you like this type of content, because YouTube will start to show you more boot videos. Okay, so let me start with the Wootten. For both these brands, I put links to their websites below. The Wootten one is not an affiliate link, but the RM one is. The Wootten legacy goes back to the current owner's father, who I think hailed from down the road from me in Subiaco in Perth here, before he moved to South Australia. In Adelaide, Ross Wootten made footwear in Adelaide's famous jam factory. Wootten's history amalgamates with that of another small footwear maker called Custom Fit, which made shoes, football boots for famous Vic Football League players, and also orthopedic footwear. Jess Wootten joined Custom Fit in Victoria in 2008 with a background in design and footwear, and in 2012 took over Custom Fit from the previous owners, and the brand changed to be called Wootten. In the last 10 years or so, Wootten developed their manufacturing and retailing and are now based in the regional town of Ballarat, about an hour and a half's drive outside of Melbourne. Jess is joined by his partner Chris, and they employ 3 or 4 other workers. Their factory showroom is open to the public, who can visit to buy some off-the-shelf products or get measured and order their boots and shoes for manufacture and then later delivery. Currently, they make their boots, bags and other leather items mainly to order in order to keep the costs of stocking down and to provide a handmade product for their customers. Now let's switch focus. R.M. Williams started, you could say, in very similar fashion with the founder Reg Williams, learning his leather craft from an Aboriginal itinerant worker called Dolomik, at first making saddles in the South Australian outback in the 1930s. Reg developed into making other leather goods and eventually the famous elastic-sided Chelsea boots. By the 1970s, the brand had expanded throughout Australia, while the factory remained in the suburb of Prospect in Adelaide. By this time, it was no longer a one-man band making and selling the boots, and the factory was industrial scale, but still using over 80 handmade processes. Reg sold the business in the late 1980s, and the new owners went into receivership in 1993, but was rescued by Reg's longtime friend Ken Cowley in partnership with Australian millionaire entrepreneur Kerry Stokes, a West Australian, and some smaller shareholders like the actor Hugh Jackman, another West Australian, and the backing of hedge funds. Then in the 2010s, it was taken over by global luxury brand LVMH, or Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, which ran the brand until they sold it in 2020 to the current owner, mining magnate Andrew Forrest. Since the 1980s, RM has been a national and then global brand, very different from 5 people working in a cooperative factory in regional Victoria. RM's history has gone from selling affordable boots to farmers and stockmen working in paddocks, to international sales to well-off lawyers, accountants, brokers, and boot collectors around the world. RM Williams makes about 500,000 pairs of boots a year. Wootten makes 400 or 500 pairs. And in the world of stitched or welted, recraftable heritage boots, there's nothing in between. Now let's take a closer look at these 2 boots and check out their similarities. First off, they are both Chelsea boots. Briefly, there are 2 disputed histories about why these are called Chelsea boots. There is no dispute about who invented them, Queen Victoria's bootmaker, who made her these walking and riding boots with elastic sides that made them easier to pull on and off than the old lace and hook riding boots of that day. Only they were called elastic-sided boots for a very long time after their invention. No, the dispute is how they got to be named Chelsea boots. The first story is that in the 1960s, pop groups like the Beatles, who congregated in fashionable Chelsea in southwest London, wore these as part of their original neat suits. Due to the popularity from fans and people following them in the fashion stakes, they then became to be known as Chelsea boots because that's where they wore them. But my research also provides another origin. In the days following Queen Victoria, in the Edwardian era, the fashionable titled rich people, the forerunners of the Sloane Rangers, also lived in Chelsea and were known in fashionable salons as the Chelsea set. They followed Queen Victoria's liking for these riding boots, and hence they became known as Chelsea boots. I suppose both could be true, but I have come across many early 20th century advertising posters for boots with elastic sides, and they are clearly called elastic-sided riding or elastic-sided work boots, even from old R.M. Williams posters. It was only in the 60s and 70s that the term Chelsea boots became more popular. In Australia and the colonies like South Africa and India, there is strong evidence of their preference as riding boots from the 1920s on, and particularly in Australia, New Zealand and South Africa, they were also used as work boots in paddocks, sheep and cattle stations and farms. In Australia today, Chelsea boot models from Blundstone, say, and Redback, Rossi, Mongrel, and once upon a time R.M. Williams, are used as work boots for the pastoral industries and light building work. In the execution of the Chelsea boot style, both Wootten and R.M. Williams make the whole cut Chelsea. That is, the uppers are made from a single piece of leather rather than pieces that form the vamp and quarters. On both, you can only see one seam up the back. Now, this is an incredibly difficult style to last. Imagine going from a flat 2D piece of leather and forming it around the last without making any creases or folds, where you have to curl the leather around a rounded 3D last. If you've ever tried to wrap a football for Christmas or even a bowl or something similar, you'll understand how difficult that is. They both have elastic-sided goring at the sides, very similar in the quality, at least in the feel of it. And they both use the cloth pull tabs at the front and back, another very Australian style. If you look at European or American Chelsea boots, you'll see the preponderance of leather pull loops, and more often than not, only one pull loop at the back. The double loop allows much more of a utilitarian motion to pull the opening out and shove your feet in, a move much appreciated when you roll out of your swag, sleeping roll, and have to pull on your boots quickly, avoiding insect and other bites. Even if not true nowadays, the origin is iconic Aussie. Another similarity are the flat soles. Indeed, you can get both of these in other outsoles, for example, Vibram lugs. But the flat sole is another iconic feature of Aussie paddock boots, allowing you to walk around in the mud during the wet and yet be able to scrape the mud off easily as you walk indoors. Now the differences. Ignore the obvious difference in the uppers leather. The Wootten in a cognac rough out and the RMs in their crazy horse bark colour. And also ignore the shape of the boots or the last shape. Obviously, both of those are a matter of design choice. The construction is the main difference or differences. Both are handmade, but as we all know nowadays, the term handmade can cover a lot of sins. We might think of a handmade boot as one where one or more people, they clip the leather with shears or a knife, they use a needle and awl to stitch the uppers pieces together, they use a pair of pliers to punch through and insert eyelets on service boots, they hand cut the leather for the sole pieces and with an awl, then stitch the welt on. Many of the bandong bootmakers in Indonesia still do this. But most of the time these days, handmade will involve at least sewing or stitching machines, and more often than not, clicking presses and electric hardware punch machines. Some brands will say handmade when they mean that rather than their footwear passing through a computer-controlled and equipped assembly line, like many sneakers these days, their footwear is handled by a pair of hands guiding it through the machinery available. Now, my mother used to make her dresses using needle and thread. Many years later, my father bought her a Singer treadle-operated sewing machine. And while she appreciated it, she never claimed thereafter that she made handmade dresses. So, both of these are handmade, but to what degree? R.M. Williams makes about 500,000 pairs of boots a year. Now, logic dictates that they don't employ a crap load of bandong handmaking craftsmen sitting in their factory to achieve this. They have a very large factory, and their boots go through a machine-aided but still partly handmade process. For example, I believe their boots are still hand-stitched using sewing machines and Goodyear welt stitching machines. I also believe their boots are mainly hand-lasted, but I've seen pictures of lasting machines, so I assume it's a combination of a machine pulling the leather over the last and then the craftsman taking over to tack on the uppers to the last. Wootten use stitching machines to sew the pieces together, but I believe they still hand cut the pieces and they hand last everything. And certainly they hand bottom all the outsoles. They will also hand dye the leathers or hand burnish them, as in my case, on order. So in many ways, while working in a better equipped workshop, their techniques are much closer to the bandong handmade techniques. The other part of the construction that's different is the method of connecting the uppers to the soles. R.M. Williams uses a Goodyear welt form of construction where a strip of leather called the welt is stitched to the insole and uppers on the inside, and stitched to the outsole on the outside edge. Wootten uses a Mackay or Blake rapid stitch. The uppers are stitched on the inside of the boot to the midsole, which is actually wide enough to pop out of the edge to look like a welt. The outsole is then stitched to the outside of the midsole. Now, both methods are reasonably water resistant because the stitches don't go all the way through, and arguably, while Goodyear welt is easier to resole, the Mackay stitch is a lot more flexible because there's a lot less leather in between. The final difference in the construction are the materials. The RMs use leather from either Australia or New Zealand, and in some cases outside, such as Horween. They use a fiberglass shank, lauded for airport friendliness, and they do use natural cork fillers. Their main lines now use the comfort insoles, and that's a combination of a rubber outsole, generally no midsole, and a pour-on insole. This is undeniably comfortable. The Wootten boots use veg-tan insoles and midsole, and their midsole has a donut hole cut under the ball, which is filled with cork. They use a steel shank, and the outsoles can be leather, rubber, or a name brand like Dr. Sol or Vibram. It's your choice. This is also very comfortable and has a more bespoke or at least custom feel to it. Apart from name brand outsoles, all Wootten materials are sourced in Australia. So in summary, you've seen the similarities and the differences. Which would you choose? Before you answer that, also know a few other things. While R.M. Williams may offer seasonal leathers and they sometimes go out of stock while they make a batch, they generally have what you want available off the shelf. For a variety of handmade style and bearing in mind their materials, they now cost 700 Australian dollars. Wootten start at nearly $1,000, and because they're more truly handmade and certainly made to order, unless there is a display boot just your size and in the color and makeup you want, you will have to wait 4 to 6 weeks, perhaps even more if they get into a busy period. If you don't like the makeup of an R.M. Williams model, that's it. Choose what's closest. But with Wootten, there are mind-numbing combinations of leathers and colors, edge dressings, stitch thread colors, and outsoles. You will have to wait, but you will get exactly what you want. The difference is close to choosing an off-the-shelf brand like, say, Viberg, or a made-to-order brand like a P&W boot brand. As to price, considering what I get, I think the Wootten's are great value. The RMs, once at $600, I would have said so too. But now at 700 Australian dollars, the jury's out. Which, in my opinion, will last a lifetime? I have to be honest and say probably both. They're really well made, with the proviso that the RMs, with their non-leather materials in the sole inside, will probably last a smidge less, or at least you'll have to get more work done in their lifetime. So, which will you choose? Tell me below, and while you're there, don't forget to click on like and subscribe. Help me get the heritage boot message out to more people, and make sure you don't miss any reviews yourself. I'll be back next week, but until then, take care out there, and see you again soon.